What's going on? Welcome to episode 16 of the hike.files podcast, a little bit of a soft relaunch. Now, you might be listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any of the other many podcast apps out there and thinking, well, great, this is episode 16. I've listened to this before. What do you mean this soft relaunch? Because there might be some people that are a little bit confused, and that's what I'm going to cover in this episode. Not the confused people, but the confused people about the podcast. There may be some people who got a notification for a new episode of hike.files and realized, wait, I don't know what that is. Because I made a little bit of a change. So let's do an anatomy or a little history of the hike.files podcast. Back in 2013, I started podcasting on a podcast called the Primitive Intelligence Podcast, which I still do. That has become more of the weird side of things. Ancient history, bizarre tales. There might be some paranormal, might be some UFOs and aliens, might be whatever. It's a hodgepodge of topics. In the early episodes, early seasons, there was a little crossover with that kind of stuff and some outdoor-related topics. And I decided I wanted to do an outdoor-only kind of podcast. So I started a live stream video podcast, and I called it the Outcast, Out''cast, which basically was the outdoors video cast. It became season 3 of Primitive Intelligence, but it was in reality its own separate podcast. So I did that for 2 years or 3 years. I did it for quite a while. And when I wound up being finished with it, just life kind of put me in a situation where I didn't have time to do it anymore, especially as a weekly live broadcast. It was much harder to do. I kind of put it aside. And then in 2023, I wanted to restart that. And I was thinking of relaunching it as the Outcast. And YouTube was just getting into doing podcasts. So I thought, oh, this will be great. I'll do the Outcast as a podcast. I'll do it on YouTube. And it'll be awesome. And I looked at all of the advice given by YouTube gurus and YouTube themselves. And they all basically say the same thing. If you're going to have a channel, if you're going to be a creator, and I do outdoor stuff, right? Let's say, so you do outdoor related stuff, but you want to do hiking videos, but then you also want to do gear reviews, you should have a separate channel for that. And then if you want to do outdoor related shorts, you should have a separate channel for that. And if you want to do outdoor related podcasts, you should have a separate channel for that. So you got to manage multiple channels depending on what variant of your particular style of creation that you do. And I get what they're saying. Like they think that you need to micro-target audiences and that there's no crossover. And I do notice in my outdoor videos that there are, I call them boo birds. Every once in a while, depending on the style of video, I know there's going to be one, maybe two people who immediately just downvote it. Give it a thumbs down. They don't like it. They dislike it. Whatever the term is used, dislike, I think. So they immediately dislike it. I don't think they watch it, but it's a style of video that they don't particularly like. So instead of just not watching it and moving on to their lives, so they got to be like, downvote it. And they do it all the time. It's never fails. Those types of videos, I'm not going to say which ones, those types of videos always get a thumbs down. Now, there's a lot of stuff in the outdoors. Like this podcast is called hike.files, but I talk about, and I'm going to talk about way more than hiking. It's an outdoors related podcast. So I understand why YouTube and the gurus say you should micromanage your audience. So that if they might just like shorts, or they just might like hiking videos, or they just might like backpacking videos, or they just might like gear review videos, or they just might like kayaking videos, or they might just like, and you should do something different for each of those. It's incredibly difficult, and I don't know who has the time to have a channel for all that. But I decided a podcast is different So I'll do the podcast as its own thing. And over the years since I did Outcast, there's so many podcasts now that have the word or words Outcast in them. I just decided, I'm going to start something new. I'm going to do it as the hike.files podcast, and that's what I'm going to do. And I initially launched it as a YouTube-only podcast because I was assured through everything I read in the way that they were promoting their new podcast platform that podcasts are going to get pushed. Get in now, get your podcast out there. We will push it. Everybody's going to do good. And that just never happened. So I love my subscribers on Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors. You guys are great. But very few of them knew I was doing a podcast. And I get some people who listen to podcasts who came over to KZO, and a few people from KZO who went over to the podcast. But there's no way to get people who didn't know about the podcast to know about the podcast without me spending all my time talking about the podcast. And that kind of defeats the purpose. So after episode 15, I'm looking at all the analytics. I'm looking at the numbers. And it's just, I wasn't seeing engagement. I wasn't seeing any push from the YouTube side. And obviously, a lot of that push falls on the creator. You got to put the effort into getting it out there. But when you get told that, hey, we're gonna really go out of our way to make sure these podcasts, that's what we want. Now, I don't know, maybe just outdoor related stuff, maybe just me, I don't know. But I didn't see it. So I decided I'm going to take a break. Now, in the past couple of weeks, I've been thinking I want to get back into doing the hike.files because I never really announced a break. I'm not doing seasons with this podcast. It's just going to be, the numbers will just exponentially go up. And I will randomly take breaks. So that's just the way this one's going to be. But I want to start getting into new episodes. The weather's starting to get nice again. I've got some stuff from the winter I can talk about and, all kinds of things like that. And I started looking at it and I thought, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I got to change what I'm doing. So YouTube was where I started it. And now what I did is I've kind of done away with the hike.files channel. The channel's still there. I was going to leave the videos up, but I didn't want there to be any kind of conflict with the transfer over to Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors. Because YouTube's algorithm, YouTube's AI will look and say, hey, this is the same content as this channel over here. Even though they're both my channels, I can actually be in infringement of my own material on two different channels, which I don't understand. But to avoid that, I took those videos down. And now instead of doing a video podcast, which this is kind of nice because I don't have a camera running right now, nothing. I'm just talking into a microphone. And that's another part of it that I want to talk about too. But yeah, it's just going to be an audio podcast. I now host all the files over at Spotify. When I first started, years and years ago, I had the servers set up, rented servers. I did all the hosting myself. All the audio files stayed on my servers that I rented. I did the RSS feeds. I did all the implementation, all the exports, all the imports, everything. It's a lot. Spotify, though, allows me to, and this isn't an ad for Spotify, but the way Spotify does their hosting is it's free, and you upload your files. They do all the encoding. They host it. They give you the RSS feed. You can do video podcasts there, and then they give you the means and the instruction to disseminate your RSS feed to anyone and everyone that uses it. So Apple Podcasts, if you're listening on Apple, that file originates at Spotify. If you're listening on Podcast Addict, that originates on Spotify. If you're listening to it on YouTube or YouTube Music, that file originates at Spotify. I don't have to do anything extra, and it's nice. Now, about it being nice that there's no camera in front of me, when I first started doing this, podcasts were audio only, and that's kind of how I like podcasts. I think of podcasts as almost like a radio broadcast. And video podcasts are cool, I guess. But when I listen to a podcast, I listen to it. I'll put my headphones on and I'll work, or maybe I throw it on when I'm driving and I'm just listening to it. I don't want to look at a screen. I don't want to be distracted by that. I just want to listen to it as I'm doing something else. And it seems like in the past maybe 5 years or so, podcasts have become this big production. There's big production companies. They got studios and like podcast hosts. And then you've got engineers and you got producers and you got script writers and you've got on location people and you got this whole thing. I always thought podcasts are supposed to be simple. Like anybody should be able to do it. You could use the microphone on your phone if you wanted to. And just set it up in front of you. Talk about what you want to talk about. Put it out there and let people listen. That is the essence of a podcast. And that's how I'd like to keep it. So that's a long roundabout way of saying I've taken the podcast away from its own channel. It's now a part of KZO, Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors. It's part of my normal hiking channel. So if you got a notification about a podcast, that's me. So, and the reason why I did that is because it is related to everything else I do. It's related to, it's going to be hiking, it's going to be backpacking, camping. I might talk about gear, I might talk about some kayaking, outdoor related stuff. And that's what I'm going to talk about. I'd like to talk to some people. So I'm going to reach out to a couple people and see if they'd like to get on and do an episode. And we can just kind of talk shop. I think it'll be fun. And it's all centralized in one place. So I'm going against the algorithm. And I'm going to just do the podcast as part of the channel. And you're going to see on Kurt Zitzelman Outdoors, you're going to see my long form videos. You're going to see shorts. You're going to see podcasts. I do some community posts now and then. I don't really do a lot of posts because I see them on YouTube and I kind of ignore them. So it's a cool option. It's a cool feature, but I don't know. Do you guys want to see more of that? I don't know. So I know this is, I'm talking a lot about the YouTube side of it. So if you're listening to this on another platform, I do apologize, but I just wanted to let you guys know this is what's going on. This is going to be the new direction of the podcast. And I hope you guys enjoy it. I really like doing it. So I'm going to ask, and you hear this come from creators a lot, subscribe or like, share, comment, do all those things. And yeah, it does help with the algorithms and it helps you get noticed more. It helps you get out in front of a larger audience. But by and large, and this goes for not just me on this podcast or on videos, this goes to anything you watch. If you're a creator, you already know this. If you're not, I'm going to let you in on a secret. A lot of times we talk about this, interact, subscribe, all that. Yeah, it's great for the algorithm, but we also want to know that you're watching. We want to know that you're listening. We want to know if you like what we're doing. One of the big things that made me move the podcast over from its own channel to the KZO channel is I wasn't seeing engagement. I wasn't seeing comments, a few, but I talk to people and they say, hey, love the podcast, listen to it all the time. And you have enough people tell you that, but then you look at the actual view numbers and they don't match up. So it's either views are being misrepresented or the views aren't coming in. But if there's actual engagement, if there's comments, if there's thumbs up, if there's likes, if there's shares, comments, then we know. And that's any kind of creator, any channel, any podcast. If you like what they do, just take a second. It can just be love the episode. It could be a thumbs up. It can be anything. That lets us know as creators that you're watching, you're listening. And then it gives us a reason to keep doing it. Because otherwise, if we're not doing this just for our health. I like the creative process. I like the ability to record and then edit. If it's just audio, when I used to play music, if I'm doing hiking videos, if I'm talking about, crazy conspiracies on primitive intelligence, or if I'm doing this, I like the creative process. But if nobody's listening, you start to question why you're doing it. Now, I'm not trying to say you guys aren't holding up your end of the bargain. Obviously, there's no deal here. But when you are listening to people, if you're watching their videos or anything like that, that interaction does help for anybody and anyone that you listen to or follow. Every once in a while, just a hi, just a thumbs up, just a comment, good job. Or if you feel the need to go to a channel and watch or listen to what they're doing and you don't like it, I think that any service that offers like a thumbs up and a thumbs down, if you give a thumbs down, you should have to leave a comment as to why. Because we don't know. Like I see those thumbs down, I just laugh at them. Well, whatever. If you're not going to explain why you don't like it, I don't care. And that's not being callous. It's just, I'm not a mind reader. So if you're watching if you're watching a channel or listening to a podcast or whatever it is, and you don't like what they said, you don't like the content, don't just give it thumbs down. Give a thumbs down. Say, hey, look, I disliked this because maybe it's something in the editing you didn't like, or maybe it's something they said. And if it's something they said or opinion they had, this may not be the content for you. But if it's something that could be fixed, something that can be changed in editing or in filming or in a style, like I have a tendency to say a lot. I know that. I put a lot of pauses in things. I know that. I use an AI editing software to help get rid of some of that. Doesn't get all of it out. And I don't want it to sound robotic or fake, but just like what I did right there. I have this weird, I always call it like the Captain Kirk cadence. I tend to put pauses in, and I don't know why. But if it's something like that, and you don't like the way it is, I've had people actually do that on videos. I think it was panning on certain footage. I moved the camera a lot, and this is early in my video creation days. And when you're recording, you don't notice how fast you're moving because the camera's, unless you've got a big expensive camera, like I shoot a lot of times either on my phone or on a GoPro, something that size. So even little movements to that camera seem huge. And then when you watch the video back, you see it looks like these huge movements, and they're really not. So I've learned to try to make those pan movements a little slower and change the way I move the camera to help the camera actually move more than my body does. Because people said, love the content, but man, how much you move the camera, it makes me dizzy. And I thought, I can understand that. So I consciously make an effort to not do that. You can't always do it. Now I could use more fixed location cameras, but I'm usually on the move. So that doesn't work so well. Unless you're doing like a walk away shot or something like that, or an approach shot. But then you still have to turn around and go back and get that camera. On shorter hikes, not a big deal. When I'm doing a backpacking trip, you'll notice if I'm doing a multi-day trip, on day one, my videos, the video from day one will have a lot more of those like stationary camera shots where I'm walking away or like down a cross trail and watch me walk past. There'll be a lot more of those. By the last day, I'm not doing that anymore. I've done that too much. I don't want to add any more miles than I have to. So some of it is just out of necessity in what you're doing. Hiking videos and backpacking videos, outdoor videos. There's a lot. And I don't want to knock people who do in-studio stuff. There's a lot that's involved in that too. But when you're doing hiking or backpacking or anything outdoors, anything like that, you're expending a lot of energy. And generally, especially when you're backpacking, you're not bringing in enough calories to counter that. So at a certain point, you've got to just be like, okay, I'm just going to hold the camera and I'm just going to go. But yeah, don't just dislike. And again, that's not just for me. That's for anybody. You go to their channel, you don't like what they're doing, tell them why. If it's just you don't like their message, you don't like their style in general, there's not any need to dislike that. Just be like, okay, I don't want to watch this person anymore, and just stop watching them. It's pretty easy. There's a lot of things I watch on YouTube or podcasts I've listened to where I go, ooh, I don't like this. I don't do anything to dissuade them from creating. it may not be my cup of tea. I just move on with my life. So I know this is a lot of dry information that really didn't have a lot to do with outdoors, except for a little bit I talked about recording and panning shots. But again, a little bit of a soft relaunch of the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And here's your chance, what we were just talking about with being involved. If there's a topic you want to hear me talk about, or maybe a guest you'd like to see me try to get on, let me know. You can contact me at hike.files@gmail.com. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below. On Spotify, you can also leave a voice message, like a voicemail message. So you can do that too. Multiple different ways. I used to have a Hike Files website. I did away with that. It was getting no views, really. Not many views. So it wasn't worth the effort of putting the site up. That may change in the future. But as of right now, I'll put a link to the Spotify page in the show notes. So if you're not already listening on Spotify, you can go there. It'll give you all the information, contact information, and all that. So that's going to do it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Hike Files podcast. I'm Kurt Zitzelman. Thanks for listening. See you in the next.